Welcome to History 338, the history of Japan. This is Week 1, Part 1. I am your instructor, or your professor, Dr. Paul Tenkate. All photo sources used in this PowerPoint are either copyright free or I've marked the citations of where they're from. First of all, disclaimer. Online classes, because of their very nature, are demanding. They require a great deal of self-discipline and self-motivation. Now, in addition to that fact, this is an accelerated 8-week course, so we'll be literally going twice as quickly as we would be in a normal 16-week course. We're going to cover the same amount of material that we would in a 6-week course. Because we are not meeting in a face-to-face format, that means that we need to leave the lines of communication open in other ways. Now, please know that I absolutely love teaching, and I've won a number of teaching awards, including one for the entire Greater Cincinnati metropolitan region. So I am here to help you with any questions or concerns that you may have. You can always feel free to email me at my email at nku.edu, and I check my email messages every day, and more than just once a day. I'm almost obsessive compulsive about email. Or you can feel free to call my cell phone at 859-240-2143. Try to call between 9 and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. I usually respond to whatever you send me, email or cell phone, within hours. The only exception being is that, somehow I'm at death's door. Please know that I do not use text messaging. It's not a part of my cell phone contract. Now, it's very important that you download the syllabus. I have the syllabus in a couple of different locations under the link for syllabus on the website, as well as under the link weekly lessons and assignments, and then week 1, and you'll see it there with week 1 as well. You can see that this class is broken up into 800 points, 5 critiques at 100 points each, 3 tests at 100 points each, and then I throw in some extra credit, an icebreaker of 20 points. So actually the class is, if you've got 800 points, you've got an A. I have 20 points of built-in, what I call self-service extra credit, which is essentially this icebreaker. So you want to make certain that you do the icebreaker. Also, you'll notice at the very end of the syllabus some useful websites that I list there. Things from Cornell University, the Japan Times, CIA World Factbook, Japan Information Network, United Nations, etc. These are all wonderful websites. These are the kinds of websites that you would be able to use for your critiques. I don't want you using .com websites. I don't want you using websites that I haven't approved, but these are some of the approved websites that you can use and that you'll learn quite a lot from. So 500 points are 5 critiques. And good critiques have 3 components. They have an introduction, which is essentially a complete paragraph with a clear thesis that answers those kind of who, what, where, and when questions. Then you have the body of the critique, multiple paragraphs containing detailed information that would support that thesis. And please have every paragraph have a complete and concise, clear topic sentence. And then a conclusion, of course, which wraps everything up. For critiques in this class, we do not want you to use vulgar language or cliches. We don't want you to use general encyclopedias or websites. However, specialized encyclopedias, such as the World History Encyclopedia, which I was a part of. It's this giant 21-volume encyclopedia. We have it at the Steele Library, NKU Steele Library. And the Encyclopedia of Asian History. Those are okay to use. So acceptable sources for critiques in this class include scholarly books. They include scholarly journals, like the American Historical Review. And you might say, well, American Historical Review, isn't that just about American history? No, it's about all of world history. It's just named after the organization of professional historians who are members. the Journal of Asian Studies, the Journal of World History, etc. Specialized encyclopedias, as we just mentioned. Government documents and government websites are some of those websites that we list for you on the syllabus for this class, listed as some useful websites. But I don't want you to go to .com and generally .edu, .net websites. We're trying to avoid, people that have no credentials and have just set up their own website and so on and so forth. Respectable newspapers, I'm thinking in magazines, you would especially love one of the best magazines in the world. It sounds like it's only about economics, but it's not. It's called The Economist. New York Times, Newsweek, things like that. Now, for critiques in this class, you can read over again what is in the syllabus, and this particular PowerPoint lecture is to also help you kind of identify what to do. We do have a model critique, which was written by me on a totally different topic unrelated to the history of Japan. That is listed under week 1 for you, and you can read through and see what a model kind of critique looks like. And if you have any questions, you can also ask me those questions. But you can see that we divide this up into very clear and concise rubric, which shows you where you will earn your points. 15 points would be, and see each one of these, C-R-I-T-I-Q-U-E, isn't that cute? Critique spells out critique. The first thing is, are you comparing and contrasting the assigned readings? Now, sometimes you're only going to have one assigned reading. So by assigned readings, we also mean the stuff that you're going to find and order on your own. And I'm going to show you how to find those resources as well. Is it relating to the time period? So I mean, if you're talking about World War II, are you sticking with World War II? Or, are you getting everything mixed up chronologically? I think that for the 300 level course is probably not going to happen, but we have to stick that in there. Now, this is really important. Each week we're going to ask you to read some assigned readings, but we want you to find other things, other sources on your own. So each and every critique needs to have at least one other scholarly source. And we don't want you to use Wikipedia, Encarta, Britannica, edu.com websites. Again, those websites which we have on the syllabus are fine. And then each critique should have at least one note. We're going to use text notes in this class. So one footnote and a bibliography, and we want you to be able to cite those correctly so that you show your professionalism. Now, 15 points are teasing apart the arguments with impartiality, with objectivity. So, the purpose of a critique is to, you can hear it in the word critique, is to work on your critical thinking skills. And critical thinking skills, usually involve being able to think about something. So you read something and you kind of take it apart in your mind, and you analyze it. You break it up into pieces, into themes. And then after you've done that, you do some more research on your own, and then we take what research you're doing and what assigned readings you've done in the class, and you synthesize things. So when we think critically, we really, first of all, break things apart. That literally means analysis. A-N-A is that prefix for kind of breaking things apart. So first of all, you do that. And then you do some more research, and then you put the pieces of it all back together in your mind, and you synthesize it. C-Y-N, synthesis, means to bring together again, to join together. And when you do that, you don't want to really go into it in an opinionated manner. Say, for instance, with the history of Japan here, you might think that, I was, say, raised as a Christian, or I was raised as a Jew, and those are, Western religions. And you might say, and I was raised in the United States, and And, I don't believe that Shintoism or Buddhism, I don't like those. Let's say you're going in with those thoughts of, I really don't like those religions. I don't understand those religions. Well, this is the kind of class where we say, whoa, sit back. Take all of your own sort of cultural baggage, the things you grew up with, the things you thought of, and try to look at things objectively, not subjectively. So again, this is not to be an opinionated kind of critique. We are looking for the facts, not opinions. Now, sometimes when you read things, you might say, well, this author didn't seem to cover this question. I've always wondered about this, or I've always wondered about that. So sometimes you might formulate questions in your mind, and you might tell me in your critique, you're wondering about this. This author did not seem to really cover this. And maybe they didn't cover it because maybe it didn't fit their thesis. Maybe they chose to ignore it. Maybe they just didn't know about it. Maybe, they glossed it over. And then 40 points, really, this is very important because in jobs, in the real world, as we say, professionalism is important. We need to make certain that when we do things, we do them in such a manner that they're clear and concise. And so we want to make certain that it's of at least 900 words, that each essay has a theme or themes. It has an introduction, a body, and conclusion, and it's written with proper grammar, correct spelling and pronunciation, and appropriate voicing. And by voicing, I don't mean I, my, me. You shouldn't use in this kind of critique for this sort of class, I, my, me. There are ways of avoiding saying I, my, me, and that is, you say the author so-and-so states, or, this author concedes that, or argues that, or debates that, or whatever. And that's the kind of way you do it. And you don't start your thesis out by saying, I am going to talk about this. Just, boom, go right in there and talk about it. Say, after World War II, Japan was, subject to an American occupation by General Eisenhower, blah, blah, blah. You just go in and say it right off and right away. Now, one more thing I want to say. I am always happy, always willing to go ahead and proofread things for you. Now, I can't do that at the last minute. So our critiques are due at 11:59 p.m. on Sundays. So, if you get this thing to me on a Thursday or Friday or even Saturday, and you say, hey, I'd like you to look over this. I'd like you to proofread this for me. I'd like you to make some changes, some revisions, help me with my grammar or whatever. I'd be most happy to do that. But, if you're sending it at, 12 noon, 12 hours before the thing is due, I may or may not be able to get to that. So please just understand that as long as you're getting things done early, I'd be more than happy to help proof it for you. Now, we always have to state, it's part of our responsibilities, and we're told to do so, what plagiarism is. And please know that plagiarism is quoting or using wording from a book, journal article, internet, or other source verbatim. That is word for word without putting the quote in quotation marks and citing it in a footnote. You don't want to do this because 99 out of 100 times you're going to get caught. All of the Blackboard kind of assignments that we use in this class use a safe assignment system, which is checking literally word for word everything you write against thousands of sites online and against every paper that's been written at every college and every university in America and throughout the world that uses Blackboard. It also keeps a special lookout for papers that have been written for, say, Dr. Tenkati's History of Japan, History of China, and other classes before, and it will, it'll show that, mark that. In fact, I've turned on the feature, and you can even look at that yourself. Now, inevitably, some of the stuff that this system picks up and says is plagiarism is not really plagiarism. For instance, bibliography. Of course, some people have used the same books over and over. So, if it's looking at your bibliography and footnotes, it's not generally a problem. If it's looking at things in the text, and if it's just a few words, it's not a problem. If all of a sudden it starts looking at line after line and saying it's quoted from someplace else, then it's a problem. Even if you paraphrase another person's unique ideas, thesis, themes, research without giving them credit in a footnote. And I always use as my example here, Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, at least for Western Europe he did. And, you don't have to footnote something like that. That's generally known information. Now, if all of a sudden you would start talking about where Christopher Columbus was really from, was he from Genoa in Italy, that we don't know really a lot about his life, that he seemed to have moved about, that he seems to have claimed that he was from a higher station in life than he actually was from, etc. Now you're getting into stuff that people have researched over years and years and spent their lives doing, and you probably start, even if you're not quoting things verbatim, you're talking about their research and you need to credit them in a footnote. You can't use another person's tables, graphs, photographs, artwork, illustrations unless you give them credit in a source reference. Of course, you're not supposed to use any or another part of a student's paper or presentation, even if that student approves. You're not supposed to get a paper or presentation from a free essay or presentation site, or are you to buy one or to pay somebody for doing. Avoiding plagiarism is easy if you know the examples. So in this example here, I'm actually going through it, and I'm doing it word for word, so it needs a footnote. And a footnote is what you would use in many classes. You can use it in this class, but we'll also be using in-text notes, which I'll show you an example of in a minute. Now, if you would decide to take this entire quote here and to quote it word for word, it's what would be called, it's a very long quote, and in very long quotes you need to block it, and it becomes a block quotation. And it depends upon your professor, but generally that means that you single space it, you begin the quote on a new line, and you indent the entire quote and include, of course, a footnote. So this is a block quote. And the reason why it is a block quote is it is so very long. And somewhere, someone along the line, some wily, witty professor said, unless we do something like this, we're going to have some student who's going to just make his entire paper a bunch of quotes. That is, he's just going to cut and paste everything. So this is kind of to let you know, hey, I'm really taking a big quote. It's not mine, etc. Now, let's say you would just paraphrase the information here, and you would say Asia's population increased in the period 1750 to 1900 is evidenced by a population explosion in China from 143 million in 1741 to more than 400 million in the 1840s. Well, normal people like you and I, even if we have high IQs, don't run around and generally know this kind of information off the top of their heads. About the only people in the world that would know such useless information are people who have photographic memories, which some psychologists wonder if those even in fact exist. Of course, the show Big Bang Theory with Sheldon, shows him with Sheldon having a photographic memory, or an eidetic memory as it's called. But trust me, I've been in academia for decades, and I have never met anyone, not a professor, not a student, who had, and I've taught thousands of students, and I have thousands of colleagues, and I've never met a one who actually has a true eidetic, or photographic memory. So you need to paraphrase that kind of stuff. So you don't need to worry about a footnote for paraphrasing this kind of widely disseminated information. Now, if, again, you use something like a graph, you need to source it. So see how we've sourced it out. And footnotes, endnotes, and in-text footnotes. Footnotes appear at the bottom or foot of a page. Endnotes appear at the end of a paper. For this class, we'll be using in-text footnotes. And this is an example of an in-text note or an in-text footnote. That is, you just take the last name of the author, the year of publication, put in a comma, put in the page number where you found it, and put it in parentheses, and you put it actually in your text itself. That's an example of an in-text footnote. Use footnotes, use in-text footnotes. It doesn't really matter to me. A bibliography is a list of your sources used, and it's given at the end of the paper. It includes important information like an author's first and last name. It includes the title of the book or the title of the article, the place of publication, publisher, date of publication. And so it kind of looks like this. So the last name, Jane Doe. Jane Doe would come before John Doe, because if you have the same last name, then you have to go to the first name. Hence, J.A. comes before J.O. If you have then the same first name and last name, then you need to go and look at this. And that is, you're going to actually be looking at the title of the, so John Doe, M becomes before T, etc. This is how a book citation is done. This is how a dissertation citation is done. This is how an article is done. This is how a website is done. This is how a book review is done, a manuscript, interviews. And when in doubt, you can always ask me. And of course, one other thing that you can do, so you must use Chicago, also called Turabian style, for this class. And please know that a free program is available to assist you with correctly formatting your bibliographic references. So we're going to go there right now and show this to you. And it's called the Citation Machine. And what you want to hit is either Chicago or over here in more, Turabian. We're going to see how this thing works. Okay, let's go Chicago. All right. And we can do an autofill mode or a manual mode. And we're just going to say, look for books by that brilliant historian, Paul Tenkate. And then we're going to go over here and search books. Oh, and let's say, gee, we just used the Encyclopedia of Northern Kentucky. So we're going to select that one. And we find out that it has found it. And it is found where it's printed, who it's printed by, etc. We go down, we hit Create Citation. Boom, boom, boom. There's the correct citation. Now that's all we have to do is cut and paste this right into our papers. And that is that handy, that easy. Okay? Nothing to it. All right. So let's see where we were. We were on our PowerPoint. Okay. All right. Next. So where do I go for an additional source? What's trustworthy? Well, we're going to avoid those certain websites and Wikipedia, etc. And we're going to rely more on the professional sources that you can find in the digital databases at NKU, etc. Steely Library databases will usually require you to log in using your username and password. In the upper right-hand corner, sometimes they'll have, they keep changing their websites. You'll see something like Library Steely when you go to nku.edu in the drop-down menu. And then once you go there, you're going to find lots of things. In fact, you'll usually find research help. You'll find research guides. And some of those research guides will lead you to things like books and media, world history, etc. The reference items tab will usually show you things like Credo reference ebooks so that you could actually find a book. And you might say, I don't want to read a whole book for my critique. That's just too much trouble. Well, we're not asking you to read a whole book for your critique, but you might find a chapter or so in a book and that critique that would be very useful for you for that week. So there's that. There's all kinds of humanities ebooks available. Or you can just look at some of these other tabs like databases or journals, A to Z. And one of the things that we use a lot in history and in the humanities is JSTOR. And it literally contains a lot of journal articles from many different hundreds to thousands of journals, and hence the name JSTOR for journal storage. If you did a JSTOR search for something like, I'll just use a topic from European history, the Habsburg Dynasty, you can fill in all of the things, and you can do usually an advanced search that tells you that I only want to see content that I can access. Maybe you can tell them you only want to see articles that have been written in a certain range of years, etc. And usually, so in this instance, it found 2,216 articles. And some of those are book reviews rather than articles. And you notice that when you click on an item, a short abstract appears on the right-hand side. And that tells you a little bit about it. So you can say, well, do I want to use that for my paper or not? And then if you decide yes, you can click PDF and the article will download for you. And very oftentimes when the article downloads, it already has a lot of the bibliographic information that you'll need. And if it's not exactly in the format that you have, then you can use that citation machine and put it in the format, or use this handy-dandy lecture in PowerPoint to know how to put it in the correct citation. Under the Databases tab on the Steele Library NKU, and it would be true of many other libraries across the country, there are a treasure trove of digital full-text articles accessible through what we generally use in history, JSTOR, Academic Search Premier, Project Muse, to name a few. So experiment with these. Again, there's JSTOR, and there's a wonderful thing also called WorldCat. If you want to see which library has a book. And this might be especially useful if you do decide in this class or any other class that you want to use a book. WorldCat stands for World Catalog, and it literally catalogs millions of books from thousands of libraries all across the world. And it will tell you where they are available. And it could be really handy if you're in a metropolitan area like Cincinnati or Louisville, because then you can find out where are the nearest libraries that have that book available. And if you need the book for some research, probably it's not going to work for this class since it's only an 8-week class, you can always go and get SourceFinder at NKU, which is our interlibrary loan source, to help you get the book in a week or two. WorldCat is amazing. Again, I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm going to put in Encyclopedia of Northern Kentucky, hit search, and then I'm going to find out there are hundreds of places across the United States that have the Encyclopedia of Northern Kentucky, including Northern Kentucky University. See, that'll pop up right away. Sometimes different libraries catalog things in a different manner, so actually these are all the same books. It just means that a few outlier places, for some reason, did it in a slightly different fashion. If you click SourceFinder, it will take you to the electronic form, and then you can set up an account and actually get that book sent to you. So we're going to continue on with Week 1, Part 1.